On today's show, we'll put a bow on the Florida series and discuss if there was too much pressure on the core four in the postmortem. We'll also look ahead to locker cleanout day and ponder the future of the franchise. You're listening to the Locked On at Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On at Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centered podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. What's happening, Dave? How we feeling today? A couple days out from the Game 7 defeat. Feeling any better about things?
Oh, no, not at all. Especially when you just listening to all the I could not wait to hear what was going to be discussed on like all the platforms.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I listened to like 4 or 5 different podcasts or shows yesterday.
Yeah. Yep. Oh yeah. The rotation was in full swing, full effect. Heavy rotation of listening to what everyone had to say to break down what went wrong with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And we obviously came on the airwaves like right after the game, pretty much Sunday, gave our thoughts. And we've had a couple days to sleep on it, but the one thing that we didn't really touch on a whole lot because we were doing the podcast, I guess, as the player scrums were kind of happening, so we didn't quite get to see the Matt Tkachuk comments. But there was, Matt Tkachuk and Brad Marchand, two guys who love to just play with their food. And that's really what they're doing, I think, with the comments that were made post-game. But Tkachuk talking about, the pressure that Toronto players play with. And Florida doesn't have to play with that pressure. It's why they're able to go out there and perform the way that they do without having to second-guess themselves. And just talked about how these Toronto guys, always have to play with this amount of pressure. And he believes that it's, a hindrance to the franchise. What do you make of those comments? And, is it true? Do you believe that Toronto, well, I think it's true. They do play with an abundance of pressure from the market, but do you think that is ultimately, impacting on ice performance?
I don't think it impacts on ice performance. I think usually when you're playing in a market that cares so much, it should give you the inspiration to bring out your best. The best players should want to play where the stage is, on the biggest stage possible. I think I was listening to Dangle talk a little bit about it yesterday, and it's like you don't hear Yankees players talking about dealing with the pressure. You don't hear, like, I'll even bring up like European soccer. You don't hear about any of the top clubs in England talk about the pressure. Yeah. Like, usually the best players thrive when the moment's at its hardest, because
that's what's made them the best players.
Yeah, it's what fuels them. So if all of a sudden pressure's not something you want to deal with, like, to me, when I heard Tkachuk talk about that, I'm like, but you played in Canada before. Like, you don't think you didn't feel pressure? And he still performed when he was in Calgary.
Yeah.
So, like, I feel like they're trying so hard to troll the media and the fans because they were trying to say, yeah, this team is so great. I can't believe you guys are so hard on them. And it's like, well, there's a reason that this team, like this fan base, is so hard on this team. It's because it's been 9 straight years with just 2 playoff wins. I had to hear that stupid argument, and I don't know if you saw it too, the message about the Sabres and how they have more playoff round wins than the Leafs do since the lockout, and the Sabres haven't been in the playoffs in like 14 years. Like,
yeah,
there's a reason why. I don't think it's pressure. It's just Leafs fans don't ask for much. They really don't. They just ask you play hard. And you, like, if the Leafs had played hard in games 5 and 7, there would have been 0 booing. Zero booing. Yeah. What that booing was, you guys don't care. Like, you guys checked out. So we're going to let you know that we're not happy about how your effort was not there.
Yeah.
There's a difference, in my opinion. That's not pressure. That's guys who are paid to be the best players not being the best players, and the fans deciding, you know what, we're not happy with this, and they have every right to do that.
Yeah. I'm sure if the Florida Panthers put up a similar, like their stars put up similar stat lines in losses. Now they put up these stat lines in wins. It's fine. No one cares because you won the hockey game. But when you lose, a lot of things get scrutinized. And of course, Toronto's got the biggest media base. It's got the biggest fan base. It's global. So of course, there's going to be a lot more eyeballs and a lot more talking heads on, the subject, and a lot more people scrutinizing everything that happened. But like, you look at the final 4 games, Dave, right? Here's the stat line of the core 4. Austin Matthews had 1 goal and was a -3. Mitch Marner had 1 assist, was also a -3, and had just 3 shots on net in 4 games. Just 3 shots on goal. William Nylander did not record a point in the final 4 games. He was a -3, along with John Tavares. Did not record a point in the final 4 games. He was a -5. So your core 4 not only was not providing offense, but they were getting scored on a lot when they were out there on the ice. So they really weren't doing a whole lot of anything. They were really a detriment to the team at that point, realistically. And Jake McCabe, one of your best shutdown defensemen that you have, him and Chris Tanev, McCabe was outscored 7-1 in those final 4 games. 7-1. It's really fascinating. And ultimately you look at, what also led to the failure to get it done in this postseason once again. It's the same two things really that have plagued this team for years and years and years. The core 4 fades when the moment gets big in those games, 5 through 7, right? And that's exactly what happened. Games 4 through 7, those guys just simply are never able to get it done. And the power play didn't get it done also. Another common theme that we talk about every single spring. What went wrong? Power play is always up at the top of the list. And that is because the core 4 is predominantly part of that power play. So it goes hand in hand. But like, you go 2 for 20 in a playoff series, you're probably not going to win that series, like realistically, unless you have an elite penalty kill, which not really. It was 82%. It was not that elite. It was middle of the pack to be
like the Panthers have an elite penalty kill.
The Panthers do have an elite penalty kill. Their penalty kill went 18 for 20. I mean, that's what, 90%, if my math is correct off the fly. That's pretty good last I checked. So yeah, I mean, of course there's going to be pressure and there's going to be a lot of people, slinging dirt at these guys for their performance. But Dave, the proof's in the pudding. Like, they did not perform when the moment asked them to do so, and it resulted in a 9th straight early exit from the playoffs, right? Like, we're not just talking about one round, one series, or we're not talking about 4 games. We're talking about 9 years of failure, and it's the same thing every time. These 4 guys specifically just have not been able to wake up and get it done in the postseason and put together a quality run that could be respectable. It's 9 years of failure, and it's probably finally over. Like, we're definitely going into a new era. I don't see how they could possibly run it back again. I mean, we talked about it for the last, 3-4 years, how there has to be some sort of tangible change. Well, they already moved on from the GM. They moved on from the coach, and they have the same problem. It's the guys on the ice who aren't performing. So maybe at this point, that has to be the change this summer. And I think we ultimately will see it.
Yeah, I think it's ultimately time for, like, no more little tweaks around. Like, I brought up a quote to a buddy not talking about what Shanahan said after the Montreal series. We just gotta make some fine adjustments, but we believe in this core to finally evolve and get it done. And it's like, well, now it's the proof is that doing the little peripheral stuff not going to cut it anymore. It's not going to cut it more when your top players don't get the job done. Eventually, you have to change the formula of the main ingredient, and that's your top players.
Yep. Yeah. And it's going to be an interesting offseason. Mitch Marner, free agent. John Tavares, free agent. That's 2/4. That's half of that core four, where the Maple Leafs have a difficult decision to make on both of those players. We can get into that and more next, but it's also locker cleanout day. We'll hear from the core four. We will hear from the players, the coach, the GM. Will we hear from Brendan Shanahan, though? That's a question that I want to ask you on the other side. So we'll get to all that next here in the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. I'm a big fan of the no-shell variety. If I'm working here at my desk and don't want the mess, that's where the no-shell option really does come in handy. It's a great go-to. It's also perfect if you want to go on a road trip and you don't want all the mess, and you want to have some nice little different flavors. That's where Wonderful Pistachios really does well. No shells, Wonderful Pistachios for that grab and go ease. Get snackin' and crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more.
Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you, as we are each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, free and available wherever you find podcasts. You can also find us up on YouTube as well. It's the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's your team every day, and your team, the Toronto Maple Leafs, their season ended a couple of days ago with an embarrassing Game 7 defeat to the hands of the Florida Panthers. They got trounced 6-1 on home ice. Booze, jerseys hit the ice, beers were being tossed at the players. The fan base isn't happy. The fan base is not happy. And my question to you, Dave, is who really should shoulder the most blame with how things have played out, not just this year, but over the course of the last, 9 years of failure? Is it the core four for ultimately not getting it done, for fading when the moment rises? Or does Brendan Shanahan need to kind of take the bullet here for getting it wrong and not only doubling down and tripling down, but quadrupling down in the belief in this core when clearly everyone else saw that they couldn't get it done? And ultimately, 9 years later, that still remains to be true.
I think it's the guy who's allowed this entire thing to continue for as long as it has, and that's Brendan Shanahan. He's the one that's constantly put his support behind the core four. He's the one that, reportedly, or we've heard the rumors that when Kyle Dubas wanted to look to make a change to the core four, didn't want that to be, Kyle Dubas that was no longer here. Brad Living came, and there was literally a week before he could even think about and was never really going to do anything with that core four because, we heard the messaging was always the same. And who brings the message? The guy who runs the ship, and that is Brendan Shanahan. Like, I guarantee when he hired Brad Living, it was with the idea of you got to find a way to add around this core four to help them to move forward.
Yeah.
And this, and we'll never forget the we can and we will when it comes to signing all these guys. The accommodations that were made to around this core four, it always brought up, and it was always talked to how it made it so tough for this team to compete because you had so much money tied with forwards. And we always constantly heard it from people on radio hits and all that, and you kind of got tired of hearing it because it was always brought up. I think it's getting harder now to not agree with those sentiments. It's when you look at how the whole team as a whole played and got outplayed, it's it's not even that the rest of the roster didn't score. Like none of the bottom 6 guys really scored for the remainder for that series against Florida. It's
actually,
the idea.
Max Domi led the team with 3 points, which is actually Max Domi in games 4 through 7 outproduced the core 4 as a whole combined.
Yeah,
think about that.
When I heard, we always heard Craig Berube talk about it's not about the core 4. It's not about the core 4. Somebody has to come out and say, yeah, it's about the core 4, because the core 4 is what we have put all of our trust and faith into, and it hasn't worked. So either somebody's got to come out and say it, or somebody new has to come in and be like, this has to change.
Well, is that going to be Shanny? Is Shanny going to have to go out and fall on the sword and say that? Like, is Brendan like?
Does he even deserve the chance to come out on his sword and say it? That's the other thing.
Or is Shanny like is the Shannon plan over? Is Richard Petty going to, let him walk? Like he's
Keith Pelly.
Sorry, Keith Pelly gonna let him. Who did I say?
Richard Petty.
Oh, okay. Keith Pelly. Is he gonna let him walk? Right? Like he doesn't have a contract for next season. That's been widely reported that he was kind of a lame duck president all season long, and they would kind of feel it out, see how the season went. And unfortunately for him, his legacy was building this core 4, and then believing in this core 4. And it just didn't get it done. And a decade of the Shannon plan yielded 2 playoff wins. That's it. 2 rounds. And they went 2-14 in potential series clinching scenarios. So, it's really quite baffling that they find themselves in this situation with the amount of talent that they've been able to accumulate, without having any tangible results that followed. And I think that it's over. The Shannon plan is over. It's gonna have to be a new era in Toronto. I think on tomorrow's show we're gonna react to the players speaking and locker cleanouts. But at some point this week, I think we should probably work on figuring out what paths do the Toronto Maple Leafs have to take, one with, one without Marner, one without Tavares, one with and without, is there more to be done? Do they have to make more significant moves? Like those are the questions that I think we'll be kind of dissecting and asking ourselves over the next couple of weeks here. But I don't think Brendan Shanahan is going to have any say in those answers. I'm not expecting him to remain in this Toronto Maple Leafs president's role much longer. I think that the Shannon plan failed and is officially over. And the one thing that I still continue to kind of go back to, and you kind of brought it up, it was that Chris Johnston report that the core 4 received phone calls after they had been eliminated. Kyle Dubas came out before getting fired, came out and essentially said, we'll have to look at things this summer. And it felt as though for the first time, this was 2 years ago, that there was going to be tangible on-ice change. And Dubas, I think, saw that this core couldn't get it done. And Shanahan chose the core 4 over Dubas. And that turned out to not work out. Now, again, True Living's been a great addition. He's been a good GM. So, ultimately maybe moving on from both is the right call, but you didn't even give Dubas a chance to see if he could try and mix things up and change the minutia of the group by moving out one of those players. And at that time, Mitch Marner had a no trade, did not have his full no trade. I think it was a modified 10 team at that time. And then was it July 1st? It kicked into a full no move. I want to say
I don't think he had any, because I think at that time there was no protection. I'm just looking it up right now.
I feel like there may have been
he had nothing. He had no trade protection until last year. So just after Dubas got fired and Julian came in, there was that window in time where you could have made a move with Mitch Marner. I think Nylander had, if I'm not mistaken, he was in the same boat too. He had a no movement clause in the final year of his deal too. So he had 2 players there where you could have looked to make a move and you basically took away that opportunity. I mean, and frankly, could have done it the 4 years before that too.
But
and maybe,
you know,
and that's probably where the issue was too, is that maybe you should have considered that move a lot earlier, and we wouldn't have had this mad race to figure out, oh, let's get the best. We have to figure out how we're going to make this move now before the clauses kick in. Like, that's also, a tough look as well when you consider you had a lot of evidence well before that period before Kyle Dubas let go to make a move.
One of the weirdest decisions, I think, over the course of the last few years was Brendan Shanahan's decision to fire Kyle Dubas but keep Sheldon Keefe.
Yeah,
I thought that was a very bizarre decision at the time, and I think it really did set this team back a couple of years. Now, granted, Chief wasn't available at that time. Had he been available, maybe it would have been different. Who knows who the coach would have been if, the 2 years ago, Sheldon Keefe got fired after, at the same time as Dubas. But still, to me, it just kind of made things very, I don't know, wasteful. It was a wasted 2 years because the first season, I mean, like you said, between, I want to say Richard Petty again. I don't know why I wanted to say Richard Petty again.
Who was there before Keith Pelly? They didn't really have a guy.
No, but Keith Pelly was the guy I was thinking of. He took on the job at the same time as when he was hiring Brad Treliving. And he basically made the decision, all right, we're going to bring in Treliving. He's going to be the general manager. And they both had, like you said, a week to make a decision on Mitch Marner, essentially, if they want to trade him before that no trade clause came in. Not really enough time to make that decision. And then they allowed, a full season to go by so that Treliving could see what they have in the group. And by then, he was already stuck with them because all the protection was already locked in for this group and these players. And he couldn't do anything without them saying yes. And he fell into that problem. This deadline, there was a widely reported trade that they had gone to Mitch and asked him to waive his no trade clause to go to Carolina to try and land Mikko Rantanen, because clearly Treliving noticed or knew that don't think this core can get it done. They do need someone, a catalyst of some kind, a playoff performer to come in and maybe that would give them the best chance to finally break through. And he was willing to give up Mitch Marner to land a guy who he felt could do that in Mikko Rantanen. And by the way, he's leading the playoffs in scoring, I might add. And ultimately, Marner nixed the deal and it fell through and never came to fruition. So that tells me that Brad Treliving also believes that this core can't quite get it done. And if he was willing to trade, Marner at the deadline, I don't think he'll be hell-bent on keeping him here and giving him another extension after another awful showing here at the end of the playoffs leading to the exit. It's going to be an interesting year or an interesting offseason for the Maple Leafs. It's been a waste the last couple of years, but this is a season where they could actually make some significant, impactful change. There's a boatload of cap space for them to do trades, for them to do, heavy shopping in free agency and really change the makeup of this group. So I'll be curious to see what happens. I'll be curious to see what we hear from a lot of the players tonight. It's locker cleanout day this afternoon. And, we're going to hear from Mitch Marner. We're going to hear from Austin Matthews, Craig Berube. What do we want to hear? What do we want them to say? We'll get to that and next on the Locked On Leafs podcast. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you as we are each and every Monday through Friday on the Locked On Leafs podcast, all throughout the offseason. So just because the Leafs decide to flame out and lose on Sunday, it does not mean that the Locked On Leafs podcast is doing the same. We're not checked out. We're checked in, and we're locked in on the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leafs-centric podcast. It's locker cleanout day, which is, not a fun day for the players. It's really the last time that they'll be able to see each other. They have their exit meetings with the coaches, and you get to speak with them. We'll find out, what injuries people are dealing with, and whatnot. I'm curious, Dave, if there's anything that you are wanting to hear at locker cleanout today.
Accountability.
Mm.
I think
You don't want to hear anything about passengers. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't want to hear about passengers. That was that comment really picked apart yesterday. Yeah, it's time for these guys who were, who kept saying that this year was going to be different, who, had the belief that this was, they were going to find a way to get it done, to finally take accountability for why it didn't ultimately get done in the end. Okay, and not that, we were a bounce away. I don't want to hear about bounces. I don't want to hear about, we were right there. I want to hear, what, we failed. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we failed, and we're sorry for it. Like, be sincere about what went wrong. I don't want to hear cliches, and you're going to hear the cliches because that's what all these players have been instructed of how to talk.
I don't know, man. I'm not sure. I think we will see more accountability this year than you think. Like John Tavares almost opened up. And like when he was asked post game, did a game like this make you realize how far you are from being cup contenders? And he said, yes, yes and no. But he acknowledged, like, yeah, there's another gear that they need to get to. So they're not that close, right? You look at game 5 and 7. How could you say the team's close?
Yeah,
It's not, right? Like they lost 6-1 in both of those games. Neither of those are close scores. Last I checked, it's not close. It's not, and I think you're gonna have a lot of people, realizing like it's the end of an era. It's I don't think you'll hear we'd like to run it back next year. I feel as though the team knows that there's going to be change, and I don't think that they're gonna come out and give you the cliche same answers, stock answers that they had in years past. I think it'll be a bit of a different tone, a more of a defeated tone, to be honest, in today's locker cleanout pressers. That's what I'm anticipating.
I hope so. Part of me, I think somebody will say we'd like to have another crack. I think somebody will. I don't know who. But I do think there are going to be quite a few players that are going to be like, okay, yeah, we failed. We didn't get it done. I do want to hear them say, like, to really speak on.
You heard that from Mo. I can guarantee you heard that from Mo.
Yeah, but Mo has now said it, and he's his goodwill with me has run out.
Yeah, when we talk about paths the Maple Leafs could take this summer, there will be a Morgan Riley conversation. That's not a conversation for today, but just be aware, people. There's a Morgan Riley conversation to be had that Dave and I will divulge over the course of the next couple of weeks here. But yeah, like I think Riley will come out and say it. Whether or not it means anything to you at this point, I guess is up to you, I suppose. But yeah, there's not a whole lot really that they can say, though. You know what I mean? Like, other than like we just weren't good enough, as opposed to we were close, we were right there. I feel like there's going to be a we were not good enough, and it showed the lack of preparation. And I'm hoping. Here's the thing: they clearly don't have the answer, or else they probably would have played a little better in games 5 and 7. But maybe someone will come out and talk about the reason as to why they weren't as hungry. I don't know. Does Mitch talk about his contract at all? Do you expect for him to get into it? He didn't want to talk about it post game on Sunday, but will he maybe address it at least? Not whether he's going to stay or leave, but does he at least accept the question when it gets thrown at him?
I don't think so. I think he's going to just at this point just let this continue, and unfortunately, I think he's going. I got to be careful with my wording here. I think he's going to try to very much deflect it. I think he already knows where this is going, and I don't think he wants to add any fuel to it, any fuel to that fire.
Yeah, we'll see.
Or he might just say something where, he may just give a definitive, you know what, it's looking like maybe gonna just head towards, July 1. I don't think he will. I don't think
so.
His agent will want him to not speak in absolutes. I think that's where it goes.
What I will say, if he doesn't definitively come out and say, I want to be here, like Tavares after Sunday's loss came out and said, I still want to be here. Like Toronto has meant a lot to me. It means a lot to my family. My family's here. My friends are here. Like he came out and explicitly said, I want to be here. Marner did not. And to me, that speaks volumes, right? Like if he wanted to be here, he would say it, right? So to me, I'm not expecting him to give us a definitive answer if he's testing for agency or not. But if he doesn't come out and say, I'd like to be here, we'll see what happens, as opposed to, just we'll see. I think that probably tells you that he's looking to test free agency. And based on what we're hearing from pretty well all the insiders in the industry, that's kind of what they're expecting the Marner camp to do. Test the waters in free agency and see what's out there elsewhere around the league. I couldn't fathom, though, the fact that like teams, like, I don't know. I feel like teams probably will take a harder look at bringing Mitch Marner into their team, or at least, think harder about giving him, 13, 14 million, and maybe thinking, I might want to take $1 million or $2 million off that annual average salary if he's going to do what he did in the playoffs the last 9 years. 1 assist through 4 games, only registering 3 shots in 4 games in must-win scenarios, basically. I wouldn't pay that guy 13 million, 14 million. I sure as hell would not.
Mikko Rantanen has established what the ceiling is.
There's no ceiling when it comes, but the problem is it depends where he signs. Mikko Rantanen signed.
There might be no tax that decides that really is desperate to add a Mitch Marner like player and pay for it. I think
I meant more so like the no tax, like Rantanen signed in no tax state, right? So
I just don't know how much yes, that has
a lot because it's take home pay, right? Like you're gonna look at it as take home pay.
Yeah, but the players get paid in US dollars, so that does help a little bit.
Yeah, it's a higher cost of living here too.
It is. No, that is true. But Mitch Marner's made enough money already. He's going to make a good enough money again. Hey, there will be no tax states that will be willing to pay Mitch Marner. I can guarantee you that.
100%. He could show up to the ranking flip-flops. Probably will look to do that, I would think. But yeah, I'm not expecting much out of Mitch. What about Austin, the captain? What do you want to hear from Austin Matthews today?
I like to see if he gets asked about the passenger comment again and what
I think he will.
And to really expand on that thought. Who did he think was a passenger? Did he think maybe he was a bit of a passenger? Did he need to play better?
Yeah, I mean, you want him to come out and say, myself, I'm in that group. Like, would that satisfy you if he just comes out?
A little bit, yeah. Because if you can't,
he's not gonna throw other players under the bus. Clearly.
No, he's. I'm not. I don't want him to. Yeah, I want him to say, yeah, I did say there were passengers on this team, and I wasn't good enough.
Like I'm referring to like myself in that remark. Like I was not good enough. And then the follow-up has to be, well, how were you not good enough? Like, what do you mean? We're 9 years into this thing. Like, you're the captain. How could you possibly not have shown up for 4 games here when your team needs you most? baffling stuff, man. Baffling stuff year after year with this group. But seems like we're finally going to get a new group. Should be an interesting off season, and I can't wait to hear what comes from Locker Cleanout later on today. Dave and I will listen to everything, and there's a good chance we play some of the hits, some of the audio that comes through on tomorrow's show. But that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. Once we hear from the players, I'm pretty sure we're gonna hear from the coach and GM too. Was that announced? Just players
coach,
today.
Players and coach.
Players and coach today, and then we'll hear from Brad Treliving at some point. I would imagine the Shanahan discussion needs to happen before we hear from the general manager. But players and coach today, and we'll come back tomorrow and break it all down for you. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.